It's a well-known fact that Canada has produced some of the funniest people in the world. So buckle up and follow along as we present the people who make you laugh.
Canadianish comedians.
Welcome to Canadianish Comedians. I'm Laura Toogood with Julie Betts, and today we are speaking with none other than Meagan McConnell. Hi, Meagan.
Hey, Meagan. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming and doing this with us.
Thank you for having me.
You're our very first guest. Woohoo! Yay!
First the worst.
First, no, forget it. You're number one in our books.
Always.
Always, and in our hearts. So how did you get into the comedy thing? How did you know that this was what was going to be for you?
Knowing and other people maybe recognizing happened at completely different times. When I didn't recognize until I had a Groupon, and it was for Second City Improv Level A, and it was $99 instead of $300 or something. And then I took that class and I guess never looked back. But when I was a child, I used to have the nickname Muggs, and I always thought it was because of the liquid vessel.
From drinking all that beer when you were a kid?
Yeah, because I was always, they called me Muggsy Stein. But it was because I would always make faces and I guess like quote unquote mug to the camera or mug shots. Yeah. And it wasn't until I was way older than I should have been that I realized that probably only a few years ago. And yeah, I used to basically, I guess, make my mom laugh, make my stepdad laugh, and whomever I could. And between my stepdad and my father, kind of infusing all their kind of comic influences, good and bad, like Benny Hill was also included in that. So Yakety Sax plays in my head constantly, especially when I get out of the shower. Yeah. And it just never kind of wasn't around me, even when I didn't realize it was there. Basically.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So obviously nobody was surprised when you were like, I think I want to be a comedian.
Yeah, I think I was the one who was surprised more than anyone. I always saw myself more as a dramatic and serious actor, and really enjoyed the dramatic kind of like, I'm going to play a drug addict, and like kind of more character roles. Not that comedy isn't character, it's all character, but the gritty character roles, I guess. So yeah, it was really interesting to find it through a coupon.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a funny beginning to being a comedian, right?
Yes. Yeah. Ooh, discount comedy right here, guys.
Hey, that could be your shtick, the queen of discount comedy, right?
Also the name of my sex tape.
Where was that? Mine too. That's so funny.
Where did that coupon lead you?
To Second City, just the level A3 improv. And then I started taking their long form program before they made it a conservatory, and then it completely disappeared, which has now been taken over by Assembly Theater. So it's a good program, which I've never taken, but a lot of the same people who went through it around the same time I did started that one up just to kind of fill that need that was no longer available through Second City. So yay, new theaters.
Nice. There's like such a growth of comedy venues and programs in Toronto now, like more than I think ever before.
Yeah, more and more bars kind of want to have their own comedy nights, and it's just whether or not they realize how much work actually it is put into producing comedy shows, and if they just pay someone else to do it or if they try to do it themselves, because I'm sure it's not easy doing music acts either, but wrangling a bunch of comedians is a task.
Because we know how much they like to be wrangled, right?
Yes. And be on time and, remember their what venue and what set and what time when they're going to 3 or 4 in one night. But yeah.
Crazy. So crazy. So what is your go-to type of comedy? Like, are you more improv, sketch, stand-up?
I mostly do improv and storytelling, which I would say is not nearly as organized and written and rehearsed as stand-up, but is a good kind of in between. You get to tell a little bit more grounded stories and not worry so much about getting that punchline in every beat. So it allows you the freedom to be a little bit more honest, instead of building up and creating a little bit of magic around the story, which is also fun with stand-up. They're a little bit more inflated stories usually, which I haven't let myself, at least. It's a vulnerable thing too, because your writing is almost more vulnerable because it's an additional skill. So it's almost more vulnerable, at least for me, than being honest. I don't really have a problem talking personally about myself. So using a skill on top of that would be that extra step of vulnerability that I find difficult, I guess. But don't criticize my writing.
No, it is hard. You know what? Like, I think that most people don't realize the amount of work that goes into comedy, period. Yeah. Whether it be like stand up, to me is the most daunting because you're there alone and it's scary. And if you're not hitting with that audience and you're the only one up there with myself, and I think Laura's kind of on the fence because she does love stand up and she does do her improv. With improv, at least you have a team or a partner to do it with. And it does take a lot of that pressure off of you. Yeah.
There's no trust falls in stand up, or there's no,
a little bit.
I mean, it hurts a little bit more. But and it's definitely something that I've always been interested in doing. And there's also on the other end, a security in stand up of when you fail, you're just failing for yourself. You're not letting anyone else down, or you're not failing because you interrupted something that someone else was doing or you misinterpreted it. So they both have their pros and cons for sure. But there are, I think, a little bit more freedoms performance-wise in improv, because you have no choice but to be free. Otherwise, you're just standing there in your own bundle, a nervous wreck, not speaking. But which I've probably also done. But
oh, I feel you. And it kind of brings us to the next one. Like, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you when you were performing? Because I know that with stand up, one of the things is like your 8th show, you bomb and you bomb bad, right? Is the regular kind of thing. So have you had anything like that happen to you, and how did you recover, and how do you keep yourself going? Because it's important to.
I mean, there's 2 instances that come to mind. One was in class and one was on stage, and they were kind of different types of bombing. One was a narrative program where we were learning beats. So you're still improvising within each scene, but you have to hit certain beats within the scene so that the story can move forward and the next scene makes sense. And I was rehearsing the one with my scene partner, who was a really close friend of mine, who had recently confessed their for me on their birthday and didn't really accept no as an answer. And when I get in my head, usually making eye contact or focusing on the other person is the only way to really get out of my head in comedy and acting and life even. And I couldn't do that with this person because that's part of why I was in my head, and definitely wouldn't help me get out of my head, and might, also give them the wrong idea since they already weren't taking no as an answer. So I kind of froze, didn't say anything. And then the instructor pauses and goes, okay, let's reset from 1. And my 1 was in the green room at Comedy Bar, and there was a curtain, the green room, the door, which for some reason had no doorknob on it at the time. And I remember staring at the curtain, staring at the doorknob, staring at the curtain, or lack of doorknob, I guess. And kind of shooting back and forth and hearing my cue, and then just bolting out the door to the washroom and just like sitting on the floor. I don't remember if I cried or not, but I was just like panic attack. Like, how do I get out of this? What's happening? Also, this is just really embarrassing. And yeah, eventually 2 of the other lovely ladies in my class came into the washroom to console. And then the teacher asked to speak to me after class and recommended their therapist to me.
Oh, so lovely.
So, it was great.
Sharing is caring.
Yeah. So that was a really fun moment.
No.
And then the one on stage was a little bit more recent, but still a couple of years ago. And in the scene, I was playing this kind of bro-y dude. And I can't remember, I used a word that technically wasn't necessarily inappropriate, but can also be an inappropriate word. And I honestly can't remember what it is. Otherwise I'd say it. Well, not say it, but explain it. And the audience kind of like made a noise like, ooh, and I was like, ugh. So I found a way to break the fourth wall without it being poor performance wise. And I said, no, that's fair. Like, what word the word I should be using is, and then like someone else, I basically played should have said with myself, and learned something, and also was able to move on with the scene without feeling like I insulted a complete audience of people with a single word, which is very easy to do, especially
nowadays.
And obviously no one wants to do that. It's not good for their performance, and it's not good for people and their feelings and all the spectrum of emotions we can feel on either side when we do something wrong. So it was a nice, even though it was a bombing moment, it was probably the quickest recovery I've ever experienced, which was nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. You don't always expect that, especially when it's something that's a PC thing. You don't think you're going to be able to get out of it, no matter how much of an honest mistake it was. And it was just a moment. I was like, yay. Thank you. I'm not an asshole.
Yeah, you can never really tell with audiences if they're going to be forgiving or not.
Yeah. And or trust you and trust that you're not the person that they believe that word represents. Because especially these days, like, words are constantly weapons. And for the audience to trust that I wasn't intending it to be that way was a comforting moment for me, because everyone's always kind of afraid of saying or doing something wrong and it being misinterpreted. Right. And that's one of my biggest fears my whole life, is not necessarily being hated for something I did do, but for something that was misinterpreted.
Yeah. That you didn't mean to do.
Yeah. Because no matter how much you protest, no one will believe you, and almost they'll believe you less because you're protesting. No matter how many times you apologize or explain, it doesn't matter. If they believe what they believe, they're going to believe it.
Yeah. No, we see it happening all the time with cancel culture, right? Like where a comedian will say something that maybe 10 years ago was not that bad. Yeah. Probably walked the line then, but now it's coming back to bite them. Yeah. And it's scary. It's kind of scary to be a comedian nowadays. Yeah. Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and how does anyone learn? You learn from making mistakes. So if we're not allowed to make mistakes, again, as long as they're not malicious, in intent, then the opportunity to educate and rehabilitate should be there. Yeah. And not everyone wants to learn and grow. So obviously in those cases, they're douchebags. But in the cases where it's someone just ignorantly and innocently making a mistake, there should be an opportunity for their education and rehabilitation, because it's not, you can't just, end someone for a mistake. Otherwise, where would any of us be right now, comedy or not? Yeah. Mistakes are going to be made. And that's, again, how we grow as humans. That's how we evolve as animals, is, dealing with hard times. So
Mhm.
I don't know. It's the only way for us to grow as a community in general is by allowing mistakes, as long as they weren't meant in a hateful way. Obviously, yeah. But I don't know.
No, it's so true.
It's everything's very considered black and white right now, when there's always a gray spectrum. And I think we've, as a larger population, have forgotten that. And it's not the majority, I believe. I think it's just the loudest minority.
Yes.
So the people who are far right, which the right were definitely the ones who created cancel culture, even though they use it to describe the leftists, like burning books, etc. Like that. Hello, cancel culture. Like it's assassinations. Like how many right-wing people are assassinated? It's mostly left-wing people. So yeah, I think it's just it's a buzzword now, and
I know
it's just fueling more hate, like using like terms like woke and cancel culture and all of these again, hot words, buzzwords, is actually creating, I feel like, a larger divide and allowing the cancel culture to persist, because it's everyone's backs are just sitting up straighter and stronger instead of listening. And shaking hands, we're not supposed to shake hands with hand sanitizer. Instead of just squirting hand sanitizer in each other's eyes. So yeah, it's just, we just, I don't know, need to listen to each other more and trust each other more. I think trust is a huge thing that we've forgotten how to use. We need it right now. Otherwise, we're just going to become more and more divided and more separate, and the loudest people are going to win.
And that's scary. That's a very scary thought in so many ways.
Just be a ping pong of overcompensating back and forth, like is seen with American presidents and stuff like that. Like it's just a constant balance of overcompensating. And I don't want to see what's going to happen next.
I think Dwayne Rock Johnson should run for president with Kevin Hart as his VP. I think the country would be better. The world would be better.
His eyebrows is VP. He doesn't person.
Right. So funny. It's definitely interesting. Like I feel that in the last at least 10 years, comedy has changed so much, and knowing what you do now, would you do anything differently? Like how you've gotten into it, the path that you've taken, anything like that?
I probably would have done less improv, honestly, and more focused more on stand-up and storytelling. I find it's easier to make a difference with your words that way. It's fun to do improv, and improv's great for helping out acting and for you to be in the moment, and all very valuable skills. And I don't ever regret focusing on it, but feeling like I'm being productive or making an actual impact. I feel like I'd be more fulfilled doing the other two.
Okay. So for people, like everybody's familiar with improv and everybody is familiar with stand-up, but explain what storytelling is, like how that would work, where you would even see something like that.
Basically in the same venues. I mean, it's the easiest place to find where would be, like Facebook groups and stuff like that. Even if you just punch in storytelling, I'm sure a million groups will come up. Not all of them will probably be what you're looking for, but is it all defined as the same? Like, are there other words for storytelling? I honestly, there likely are, but I haven't called it or really paid attention, I guess, to it being anything else. And not everyone uses there's almost always comedy in it. It's like every drama has some comedy. Because you need it. It's like a little bit of an exhale every once in a while. And most people who do stand in front of an audience have a little bit of a natural comedian in them, because it's just, when that tension, you need the release as much as the audience does. So, and instead of crying, you laugh. So it's just a nice, again, more grounded, more open, more honest, balanced, I guess, style of not necessarily comedy, but that involves comedy. A dramedy, if you will.
Dramedy.
So
my favorite.
Yes.
Anyways.
Yeah. And you get to like identify a little more. I mean, obviously you can with stand up. But usually again, the stories are kind of packed a little bit to be made bigger. So they're funnier and kind of more cinematic. When it's storytelling, it's like, oh yeah, I can see myself doing this. You can kind of get into it more. You feel the audience is leaning in a little bit more, instead of waiting for the punchline they know that's going to come.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's why I enjoy it more a little bit, because it's a little more, it feels more involved with the audience directly.
So now, and I hate to sound like I'm ignorant, but with storytelling, is it scripted? Like, is it something that you have a script? Is it partially improvised? Like, how does that all work?
It really just depends on the person. Usually I will try to have beats at one point written, but I try not to ever carry that with me, so that I don't miss a mark, especially if I know that it could be a little bit of a funny story. If I don't, like in stand up, if I don't get all the baselines in, then sometimes the end won't really make sense, whether it's funny or not. So to make sure I get all of those in, especially if there's a style choice to it at all. And then other times it's fully written, but not word for word. Okay. But just a little more fuller than, I guess, those beats. And sometimes the first time I do storytell a story, it'll just be like, oh yeah, that story, let's see how this works. But usually the first time is just me retelling stories until they develop into something that can work on stage to my friends. So if my friends actually are listening to me instead of like looking at their phone, then I know it's something I can probably bring up on stage one day.
That's awesome.
If they're staring at the phone the whole time, then I know that I just should, shut up, but I don't.
Well, you got to keep pushing, girl. That's how you become successful, right?
Right. Who cares if no one's listening?
That's my whole life. I have kids. Like,
yes,
who listens? Nobody listens. Nobody. And speaking of not listening, we had a conversation one time about the Boys Club of Comedy.
Yes.
And how being a woman, is it a little bit more challenging to get stage time, to fit in, to get promotion, to get anything? How does that feel to you?
Yeah, even though I haven't focused specifically on stand-up myself, definitely from friends of mine that are female or non-binary are finding, especially the larger venues, the ones that are still kind of stuck in old practices, are claiming they want women and females and non-binary, but then they'll have them apply and they won't book any, or they'll book one. Oh, this is okay, we have one now, so people can't complain. So it's definitely more difficult, but the biggest problem has been and still is just the energy in the open mics and how toxic they can be. And it's still a lot of I hate to use like the buzzwords, but it's the ones people are going to hear too, so they'll also understand them, but like punch down and low hanging fruit and just it's bully humor instead of writing a joke. And there's a way to write a joke about something controversial without doing a joke that's been said like millions of times on stages for decades. So it's just about the skill level, I guess, or the effort that's being put in. I don't really understand why we need to tell the same joke.
It's almost like lazy humor.
Yeah, it's very lazy. It's incredibly lazy. But when you criticize it, then you're considered, a leftist, a woke, a snowflake, a crybaby, when it's really just them being lazy. Like, it's not the subject of the joke, it's how you're writing it. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You're not a good writer, or you wouldn't be utilizing something that's been said for decades already. Why do you need to use, like, it's not funny anymore. Like, even if it wasn't a PC issue, it's been done so much into the ground, it's also just not funny anymore. So why is it being used? And it's just to combat against, again, it's an overcorrection of the quote unquote woke culture. So, oh, I don't like woke, so I have to say these jokes. Do you? Yeah. Like, and if you do, again, write something better, not something that's just bullying and the same joke that's been recycled over and over again.
Absolutely.
And so that kind of energy isn't conducive to making anyone else but kind of like cis white males feel comfortable in those rooms. And so a lot of open mics, women or anyone else in the spectrum will try to go in and they won't go back again because it's really bad. Even ones that have been completely all male have shut down because they became too hard to deal with and police, because people are trying so hard to be shock comedians by recycling old jokes that even the producers of casual midweek open mics are like, nah, this isn't worth it. I'll just go to someone else's open mic instead. Which is really sad because people like, we can always use more open mics. It sounds like a sentence I never should have said, but there are some, again, like going through Facebook groups and things like that, there are some safer open mics where you can challenge the old jokes and be welcome instead of being considered, a woke bitch or something like that.
Do you find that those ones, like, really, when you look around, and again, I'm only really familiar with the Toronto comedy scene and not even that intensely, but there's really not a lot that comedy clubs or producers that are females or in the LGBTQ. Like, I feel that we need more.
And part of the problem is too, because there are a lot of them out there. It's just whether or not they're being accepted, and whether that's by the venues or by the other comics, whether the other comics are attending it. Because if they don't want to face the criticism for their recycled jokes, they're not going to go to those open mics. And if they're not going to go to those open mics, then their friends who might be in the audience are going to be there or anything like that. So it's kind of that, it's either side. You're either woke or you're not, instead of that gray area, which is also preventing a lot of people who are a little more in the center from performing at all, because they're going to get criticized by both ends. Which also makes it harder to get more diversity out there in general, in politically. It's stifling the community, essentially, for both sides being an overcorrection, essentially. Like, yes, an overcorrection needs to happen in order for it to be balanced at some point, but I don't know when or if we've found that balance yet. It's not across the community, at least. It's
when or if, but more so how are we gonna change things?
It's kind of the same with what I said before. We just need to listen more and trust and educate. And so if someone says something bad, you can't just shout at them. No one listens to being shouted at. As you said, with the children listening, I'm sure, that's a factor in it too. Like anyone's more receptive to a calm, educated conversation than they are shouting. But it's hard to, because when you come into it calm and shouting, often the other side, it's calm and shouting, calm and collected with the intention of having a conversation, the other side will often get defensive because no one likes being wrong or being told they're wrong. No. So they end up being the shouting, and then the other person shouts or backs off. And that's both sides. so it makes it a lot more, difficult again for the center people to speak up and be like, okay, here's the middle ground. How's that? Because neither one of the people want to be wrong. Or not wrong, but be
criticized.
Yeah. It's just, it's kind of like the truth is always in between two stories. It's kind of that. And no one seems to want to get there. Which is, I don't know, difficult.
So,
and sorry.
No, I finish your statement.
I was just going to say, because I know lots of people from both sides, and especially being a bartender, I hear the stories from both sides. And because I'm the bartender, I'm kind of a neutral zone. So as the bartender is the only place where almost I'm allowed to be the neutral zone. Like I'm Switzerland. Like they can say what they want to me. They know I'm not going to criticize them because I listen, and if I disagree or I think they're off a little bit, I will try to educate because one, I'm not a natural shouter. And two, I know I've learned through growing up in a shouty family and being in a shouty relationship that shouting doesn't ever change anything ever. Like I've, decades of experience. And all it does is make everyone stressed out and angry. And that's not going to solve anything. It's make love, not war, basically. Like we need to go back to the 70s.
So Meagan, for newbies coming through the ranks now, what would you recommend to them? What would you say to them? What would you suggest? How to, I don't know, what we,
advice would you give them?
Yeah, about the comedy scene and breaking into it.
Yeah. I mean, just go to as many, try to have as much variety, and not in your performance, but in the venues and the people and the schooling that you utilize. It's so easy to find your niche group and then stick with them because it feels safe. But that's also what causes so many divides. Like it's high school kind of mentality where like you feel safe, so you stay with them and everyone else is not cool type thing. So instead of doing that, do bounce around. The more people that do that, the more I think gray areas and openness and listening and communication will evolve from that. And it's hard because, again, especially when you're new to something, finding that little clique feels like a big hug, especially when you are at a new place and then a friend comes in, you want to instantly, hold on to their arm. As someone with anxiety, especially social anxiety, I understand that. Like, I definitely do that. But I also like trying to involve someone standing in the corner, into the group and invite them in. Like, part of the reason I left one school and kind of production company was because when I was with them, I was accepted in their group, and there'd be new people. I'm like, hey, how about we invite them over? And they're like, no, we're fine. And I was like, I'm sorry. When did I go back to high school? So just being open and it'll help you mentally and help you get over those things that you're afraid of that make you feel like you need to have a clique. Friends are good, obviously, and having that safety net is good. But when you hold on to them the way it feels like happens in the community can't evolve at all.
And that's why some of the people in it are stuck in their ways for so many years.
Yeah.
Right. Like I saw a comedian earlier this summer, and his comedy was just like bashing everyone in the audience. And it was very misogynistic. And I just sat through his set and I was like, wow, as everything that you said before. And I know that within the group, because I was there to see a friend who was doing stand-up, and within the group, I was like, well, he's kind of the odd guy out in this group, but I think that's probably one of the first times that he's ever experienced it, because he was with 3 other women and a couple other guys. And I was like, very interesting. It's interesting to watch that dynamics. And I think that if he was more open to maybe adjusting his style and be more welcoming,
Yeah.
then his comedy would evolve the way that we kind of need to see it evolve.
Yeah. And it would be something that it could still have the same style and the same kind of joke, but it wouldn't be something that was so niche and labeled,
Yeah.
one word so easily. Especially no one likes being put into a box, but then we put ourselves into boxes by doing that. And it can't feel fulfilling. It feels like a safety net as well. Like even within yourself, your jokes or your people, it just, it restricts you.
Yeah.
From, again, growing. Yeah. It's just,
Absolutely.
I'd be bored with myself if I was just doing one note thing all the time, but
Very
not that
true.
I haven't been bored with myself, but
I think we all suffer from that at times. I really do. But I find that you're not somebody who's boring ever.
Well, thank you.
You're not. You're adorable. And do you feel that pressure when you're out with people because they know that you're in your non-comedy friends? Like, do you feel that you have that pressure to always be the life of the party and always be like the funny one? And
only if you introduce yourself as such, because I remember being even at a job, I can't remember what the job was, sitting around the table with a bunch of coworkers, and one person introduced themselves as a comedian. And then everyone instantly was like, tell us a joke. Tell us a joke. And with a very critical, look and tone. And if you just, and he was a very funny person. Yeah. But even he was like, that's not how this works, but they still expect you to be able to just tell a joke.
Yeah. Julie gets that all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. So it's just, I find it's easier just to not. And then luckily my friends that I've been friends with for a long time, they don't come to shows anymore because afterwards they find everyone so on that it's annoying. They're like, we saw the show. We don't need more of it.
Yeah.
So they'd prefer it if I, toned it down anyway. So, and again, with storytelling, mine's a little toned down anyhow. So,
that's awesome.
It's quite helpful for me anyway. And my friends.
So they don't go for the Q&A afterward.
No. New people, especially there's a couple of people I've dated where they're like, well, let's improvise now then. I'm like,
yeah,
that's not, no, I don't really want to, especially because you're not an improviser.
Yeah. Oh, my best date was the guy that I'm like, yes, I'm into comedy. I do a little bit of stand-up. I did a little bit of improv, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I don't get comedy. And I'm like, okay, you can just drop me off here. I'll walk back home. Like, it's all good.
Yeah. That's like someone saying like, I don't like music.
Yeah. Like what?
There has to be something you enjoy. Like, have you never bounced your foot or your head to something? Like,
have you never laughed?
Yeah. Yes.
No.
Come on. Who does?
No, thank you.
No.
Hard pass. Thank you. Bye-bye.
No. Wow.
So what are your plans for the future, Miss Meagan? What can we look forward to seeing you in or hearing from you or anything?
Well, right now I'm trying to finally focus on getting an agent for normal acting, which I've never pushed myself to do. So I got new headshots and so yeah, going to submit for representation. So find me at a Tim Hortons commercial soon. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm sure it's going to be, a couple of years of auditioning without really getting much, but it's still like a nice stage to be in, especially since I've held I've held myself back from it for so long, for various reasons, that it's even just auditioning, which used to feel terrifying to me, is now exciting. So I never thought I'd feel that way about it, but it's good timing for it to happen since I hopefully will be doing a lot of it. But yay.
That's awesome.
Fantastic. Woo. Can't wait to see you.
Me too.
In that visor.
visor and that. Remember when Tim Hortons tried to do that? Work at Tim Hortons, you can wear your clothes home because they're cool now. And they had like weird zip up polos and like it's still a uniform, guys. Was that the 90s or early aughts or something? Like, no one's going to be proud of this.
The good part is you just be doing the commercials. You're not actually going to be working there. Like say you get that gig, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
all I can eat there is maybe some of the bagels because I can't eat egg or dairy, but I can pretend.
Commercials. I remember at one time in Canadian commercials, nobody was allowed to eat anything. They just had to pretend to eat.
Yeah.
Is that true still?
So there's always like the hands like this, but it's also so the food doesn't fall out, but it's like the weird, awkward eating. And you take little bites or you take big bites and you have to spit it out. But yeah, it's just because there's so many takes. But I think there's more real eating now that everything else is a little bit more grounded and more shows are kind of HBO like, it slowly filters into commercials, except for car commercials, it seems. But they're trying, I guess.
Yeah.
It's still awkward and still feels a little bit 80s, but they're trying.
Awesome. Well, we wish you all the best. I know that you're going to be a huge success because you are so talented.
Because I've been on this show.
So yes, imagine.
It'll springboard me.
It will. You'll be like, and that was the turning point in my career when I went on Canadianish Comedians with Laura and Julie. That's awesome. Yay, you're one of our favorite people too. We love you
so much for your time today. It was awesome.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
As we go through our growing pains.
Do they ever end?
No. Thank you for tuning in. We love our listeners and hope you are enjoying our podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find our show on Canadianishcomedians.ca. Until next time, this is